Welcome to the Daily Plunge. We're in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 8, verses 11 through 26. Now, it says that the Pharisees came, the experts in the law began to question Jesus. They're taking Jesus to court. They want the legal explanation to test him, right? They're putting him on trial, and they're asking for a sign from heaven. And Jesus don't play that game. He's not going to play that game of giving them a sign. And how often do we do this with the Lord? We're like, if you're really God, if you're really there, you need to jump through some hoop that I set up. And that's because every generation is faithless. Every generation does not believe. So every generation demands a sign. And Jesus says that no sign will be given. And part is because there is a sign. It's Jesus Christ himself. It's the cross and the resurrection. You want a sign? There it is. Don't try to pigeonhole the gospel into a legalistic expectation. That's what Jesus is trying to say here. Now, it says the disciples had forgotten to bring bread, except for the one loaf they had on this boat. And Jesus, after having interacted with the Pharisees, says to the disciples, be careful of the yeast of the Pharisees and be careful of the yeast of Herod. Now, what is that? It's that these people, think that they're above God. It's their position to put God through hoops, right? And that God has to explain himself to them. And he warns us not to have the legalistic approach, the approach of the Pharisees when it comes to faith, when it comes to trusting and believing in God's promises. And the disciples, being the clueless guys that they are, think that this is something about God's provision. What, did we forget to bring bread? What's the deal? And Jesus says, why are you still asking about bread? And then he says, don't you remember how God provided? This is not about whether God is faithful and provides, because God does. No, he's showing is that God's kingdom is that it should be their focus, not about bread. Now, the next thing is they get to Bethsaida, and there's some people brought a blind man. They begged him to touch him. And Jesus takes the blind man by the hand and leads him outside the village. Why might that be? A lot of times we are caught in systems that want to keep us caught. A lot of times we are bound up in systems that want to keep us broken and addicted. And so Jesus leads them outside of that culture, outside of that village. And the thing about this man is that at one time he did see, because he knows what trees look like, but then he went blind. And so Jesus touches his eyes, speaks. Do you see anything? I see things that look like trees. He does it again. The eyes are open. Then Jesus says this. He sent him home and said, don't go back into that village. Don't even go into that village. So obviously his home and his village were in two different places. And Jesus says, don't go back there. What are the things in your life? What are the people or places or the circumstances that are not good for you that Jesus says, don't even go back there. You've been cleansed. You've been healed. You've been brought to a new vision of life. Don't go back to the old one. That's what Lent's all about, right? Seeing life in a new way. Well, thanks, friends. Have a blessed day.